because now it's going up. Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Sustainiacs. I'm Michael Vincent. I have brand new, well, she's not a new Sustainiac, but she's a new friend of mine. I just met her. Her name is Crystal Bayliss. I got that right, didn't I? And she is Director of Strategy Engagement at U.S. Plastics Pact. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the show, Crystal. See how easy this is? I'm a professional.
Thank you for having me.
So, Crystal, for those who are watching this and have not heard of U.S. Plastic Pact, what is U.S. Plastics Pact? Because it sounds like it's the latest piece of legislation, possibly.
You know, I could see that. We are not a piece of legislation, though. The U.S. Plastics Pact is a nonprofit here in the United States, and we are focused on bringing together the full plastics value chain. So that's brands and retailers and recyclers and local governments and nonprofits and others to solve plastic circularity. And so we're focused on designing things correctly, collecting and then reusing, recycling, or composting the plastic, as well as developing end markets to make sure that we're pulling the post-consumer recycled content through the system and getting it into new products. The goal is to ensure that plastic never becomes waste and that it's continually used in the economy, hence the circular economy.
So you guys don't do much.
No, not much. Pretty boring right here.
So there's this circular economy of plastics that we're trying to build, and so you focus on just the entire circle.
Yeah,
is what I just everything within this circle you're focusing on, not one point or the other. That's a lot of stuff you just said.
It is. And certainly there's areas where we are able to focus more and make more of an impact than others. But a lot of times when I present on the U.S. Plastics Pact, I show our targets in the circle as a visual that if you're not focused on all of these things, it's not a circle. And so if you don't design it correctly, if you're not collecting it, if there's not end markets to actually use it again, it's not a circle. And then you're losing plastic to the landfill or to the environment. And so while everybody has their part to play and everybody has their area of expertise or their particular skill set or resources, if we're not pulling it all together to bring it together, like you really do truly lose the link.
You lose the link. And even when that link is there, there's leakage at times, right? Yeah. But so when you say design, are you, let's dig in a little bit here or a lot, but when you say designing the circle for these particular people or like design of products, et cetera, do you get into that product design?
Yeah. So
with the circle in mind, because that's, if there's a start to a circle, that would be it, right?
Yes, 100%. So I often tell companies that design is not the only lever, but it is the first lever. And so the U.S. Plastics Pact has 5 targets. The first one is to eliminate problematic and unnecessary materials. Those are things that either could be like harmful to human health or
like PFAs, like forever chemicals and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's on our list, as well as items that are disruptive to the recycling stream for other materials, et cetera. And we do have a new target that's a 30% reduction of virgin plastic packaging. And so I like to emphasize that that's reduction of virgin plastic. Like there's certainly plastic that we can eliminate that's not necessary, but we recognize that plastic has a value to our way of life in a global environment and with people living the fast-paced lives that they have now. Like plastic is providing a lot of value. And so we're not out to get rid of it. We're out to make it circular. And so we're focused on reducing virgin plastic. So that's target 1. Target 2 is focused on designing it to be reusable, recyclable, or compostable. And that's proper design. That's not just designing so that it can maybe get turned into something random in the future, but designing it to actually be circular and to go back into high value applications where there's.
So when you say that, are you talking about circular on a level circularity or upcycle instead of like a down cycle type of thing?
That's our goal. Okay. You don't necessarily get to that in one step, like certain things, especially.
No, film. You certainly don't.
You might have to downgrade it for a while, but ultimately we're trying to design high quality recycled content to get it back into plastic packaging so that we're not having to downcycle it, but we truly are offsetting the need for virgin plastic because you can take the package, recycle it, and get it back into the same type of application that it was originally used in.
Gotcha. So those are two targets. Are those the two targets?
Yeah. And then target 3 is we're working toward getting a 50% recycling rate for plastic packaging, which there's not national data on this, but we estimate that to be around 13% now. So we've got quite the ways to go.
Wow, and 13 might be a high estimate.
Yeah, well, depending on.
Or do you feel conservative about that?
Yeah, there was a lot of modeling that went into it. Nobody right now is collecting data holistically, and so we had to pull from a variety of sources. Certainly, it's going to range significantly by the material type as well. Polyethylene or PET bottles are recycled at a much higher rate than film, but that was where we landed on as far as what we believe our estimated rate for plastic packaging recycling is today.
Wow, and these are lofty goals.
They are.
They're very difficult goals, but they all hit each other. They all complement each other and do it. When you say packaging, well, you just answered that. It's rigids and films and foils and all of that, right?
Yeah. So our scope is plastic packaging that's primary, secondary, or tertiary. The one thing that we don't have in scope is medical packaging because that's a whole other animal of safety regulations and things like that. But otherwise,
it is. I'm working. Well, initial discussions of possibly working and advising with the Methodist healthcare system in Houston for that. They're looking heavily at trying to figure this out. And a lot of that in that particular area and in many more is the fact that the locations where you get this packaging back from, right, were not built to collect that. Just in time docks and the efficiencies of their linear supply chain were so well designed that there's no fluff there or, chaos, I guess, there to create the circle, right? I mean, the old thing. I mean, chaos breeds innovation, right? I mean, without a bit of chaos and things, you can't innovate. You can't. It doesn't allow things to change, right? There's got to be some room for disruption. And when you've got this perfect linear, bending it into a circle.
And I think also, the system that we have has been decades in the making. Like, you don't change that overnight. Yeah. And so we ultimately need to figure out medical plastic waste as well. Like, there's other things that we can get in place that would allow systems and things like that would help in these more difficult areas.
Yeah, totally. I don't want to go down the path of medical. We both understand how difficult that is, and neither one of us, I think, are 100% qualified to talk about all the different regulations and difficulties that are with the potential for biohazard waste and all that other kind of stuff. But even outside of that, just the packaging that these things come in is a massive amount of waste.
It is.
That all these things do. But so let's, if you will, entertain design, okay? Because design really impacts all three. Well, number 2 affects 1 and 3, right?
Mm-hmm. And I haven't even talked about 4 and 5 yet.
Let's get 4 and 5. Let's go. Maybe there's even more. Let's go. What's number 4?
So target 4 then is now targets 4 and 5 is where we're starting to really close the last of the loop. Target 4 is to use 30% post-consumer recycled content or responsibly sourced bio-based content. So that's pulling that plastic through the recycling process and getting it into new packaging. And then target 5 is to identify and implement effective reuse systems as part of a virgin plastic reduction strategy.
Okay. So are there more?
No, that's it.
Those are good. That is a circle. It's fantastic. I can envision a logo and all that other kind of stuff around it. That's fantastic. Well, I guess they all support each other as you keep going down the line and into the circle. It severely makes sense. So proper design Let's do that. How do you build the momentum for this, right? Because
Yeah.
especially when you start getting into secondary and tertiary, all right? Primary packaging is hard enough. I mean, and I'm not saying by that it's easy by any means, but you can at least make the case and advertise and market your way into a demand of sort, right? Of a certain level, let's say. Because, and even that seems bogus because some people, you see 75% of the people will pay 10% more for something that's packaged in sustainable packaging. But then when they actually go to buy it, they don't. That's
They don't.
completely bogus. It goes completely out the window. When the eggs are $1 cheaper here than they are there, the $1 cheaper eggs, especially right now, that's gone, right?
Yeah. In fairness to the consumer, consumers, like, they just expect companies to do it right and that they shouldn't have to pay extra for it. Like, you wouldn't go to the store and pay extra for the E. coli free SKU, right? Like, you just
Well, you might. I mean, if that were the case, you might. I mean,
but you have like some level of like, this is how it should be, and this is what company should have been doing it in the first place. And so
yeah, you would be like E. coli free, no kidding. But yes, I get 100% what you're saying. Yeah.
So they view it as table stakes. Like, companies should have been doing this already. And of course, there's lots of reasons that we're where we're at, and I don't want to minimize the cost impact that companies will take on when they redesign their package to be recyclable or include post-consumer recycled content. Like, that's not insignificant. I'm just stating this is the dynamic that they're working through.
No, 100%. I'm not questioning what you're saying. I'm just the difficulties behind these things are massive.
They are.
I mean, just talking with oh man, now I forget her last name. Abernethy is her last name. She's a chief sustainability officer at Human Scale, right? They make office tools, really awesome chairs, desks, stands, all these different types of things, right? And just talking about the difficulties in perhaps you know who she is, but talking about all the things that have to be done just to ingest a 20% recycled content into their products. People don't. It was eye opening to me because I could think in my mind, logically how difficult it was, but it never occurred to me that wait, they got somebody making 1 million of these parts, this one part for their chair, and they're making that 1 million times over for other people too. Now all of a sudden, Human Scale says, "Well, I want 20%, recycled content in that." Okay, well, they can't just switch out a machine. All these other people have to agree to it too.
Yeah.
Right.
These are massive systemic challenges that folks are working through.
Yeah. It's not just this single producer of this end product that is making that change. It's all these other people and everybody who's impacted behind there is it too. And you have to consider the rest of this circle because even though maybe they've got the formulation to do 20%, what's the consistency of that supply coming in and the quality of it?
Yeah. Well, and so that's.
So how do you prioritize the circle, I guess is the question, right? Because it's like, it's the chicken and the egg all the way around this circle.
I mean, it is and it isn't. So I truly believe design is the most important starting point. And
I agree. I agree with that.
A lot of times when I'm talking to companies, I remind them that like this is all a manufacturing environment. And so like I used to work in the consumer packaged goods space before coming to the US Plastics Pact. I worked in procurement and I was constantly after my suppliers about making sure that they were adhering to the spec, because if your raw materials coming in are too wide and they're not running to spec, you're going to either have to like slow your line down to process it, which costs money, or you're going to have a ton of yield loss, which also costs money. We're doing the same thing to the MRFs and to the reclaimers or recyclers by not designing correctly. Like we're dumping very wide spec product on them and expecting them to figure it out. And they can't do that at the rates that are needed to be able to do it cost effectively.
100%.
Get the supply that we need. And so it's really important because a lot of times we live in our silos and so you're like, well, of course I need this layer in my film because of shelf life or, whatever the case is. But it's like it's slowing down the process, it's causing too much contamination, et cetera, further down. And so what we're doing is when we bring together the full value chain to really hammer through what problems are these causing and how do we move forward, like you can take all of those factors into play. So one thing that we did this year that I'm really proud of is our Film and Flex workshop series. So multi-material film has been incredibly challenging for companies to get out of, but it's not getting recycled, and you can't put it back. You have all these different layers of materials that extend shelf life or run really well on high-speed manufacturing lines. And it was optimized for one single use, but now like it can't get recycled together. The polymers.
Well, dig into that for just a second for the people who are listening to this, because I have a cursory understanding of what you're talking about and the different uses. Because you want certain products to, when you walk down the aisle, you want people to be able to smell them, right?
Yeah.
And other ones you don't want them to be able to smell. Am I right?
Also true.
And then there's also, UV light penetration, et cetera. There's all these different things for the packaging. That's why there's so many different types of films.
Yes.
And multi-layer films, right? And those are different materials laid in different ways. And that's why you just can't take all film, or one of the reasons, right?
Correct. And so maybe you have, a layer of PET, like what you have in the water bottles, with a layer of polyethylene, which is the majority of what a lot of film is made out of, and it's completely different material. And so you can't recycle it together because they have different temperatures at which they melt. So you try to put it back into a new film, and then you've got some film melting, another film not, and that's going to put holes in it, et cetera. So I'm not a technical
and
person.
Destroy $1 million machines too.
Yes, exactly. So, the implications for this are huge. And in fairness to the brands who are doing this, like, we don't want to have higher food spoilage. Like, that's not good for the planet.
No.
But we also have to figure out how to get these into recyclable structures. And so we've gotten a commitment, for example, going to Target 1, categories that have typically been in multi-material film, for which we know there are mono-material structures that will work. And by that, I mean like just polyethylene or just polypropylene, or polymers that can get recycled with it. Companies have agreed to get out of those multi-material structures by 2030 in those applications where there are indeed proven alternates that are recyclable.
Oh, gotcha. So reducing the multi-layer packaging because it's not completely necessary for this.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
And then the other ones are on the evaluation list. And so what we have done to help find solutions on that is we launched a technical workshop series, and we went by FDA condition of use, and this thing spanned the whole calendar year of 2024. So we walked through what are the design guidelines and why, what's emerging policy that's going to impact film, because a lot's happening, particularly in the state of California. And then we went into these technical workshops where converters came and they presented high-performing film structures that worked in challenging applications. So we had one on retort and heat treatment. We had one on frozen. We had one on refrigerated shelf table, et cetera. We also reached out to the OEMs, so the production line manufacturers, the ones that make the filling lines in the factories at branded companies, and we brought them in to talk about helping their customers overcome the conversion challenges, because when you get out of certain film structures, like maybe it's stretchier or more prone to breaking, or whatever the case is, but it doesn't run at the speeds you need it to. And so it was really like a full value chain effort at figuring out how do we make this work.
I never even considered that, because not even if the functionality at the end is sufficient for the consumer product, the ability to create or the efficiency of production of that particular film is a major cost hurdle that sometimes had to be overcome. I didn't even think of speed and efficiency of production as being an issue.
And that has held a lot of companies back.
Sure, of course it does. You got a multi-million dollar, $100 million factory pumping this stuff out, and then somebody comes along and says, no, you need to use a different material. You got to retool that whole factory.
Potentially, yeah.
Potentially. or you're going to reduce their production by 20%.
Which is a non-starter for companies.
That's a non-starter. Yeah, exactly.
So it was interesting because in talking with the brand owners, they're like, I can't get it to run on the line. My OEM doesn't care. And so then I started reaching out to some of the different OEMs And it was interesting because I had some conversations with some who were like, either they're like, where is the industry going? We don't even know what we should be designing for. Like, we're not getting clear information on what types of structures they want to use. Or there were others that were like, we've been working on this, but nobody's reaching out to us for help. What's going on? And so it was interesting to be the linkage to pull them in and be like, all right, we're all on the call together. Let's hammer through this.
Yeah.
And make those connection points, because there was actually a lot of work being done that, either side didn't necessarily know about. But you have
Right.
these large corporations, and everybody kind of has their little area of expertise, but like what you're doing here maybe sort of ties over here, but that's like 2 or 3 people away and you would never talk to them. And like, people just don't connect. And so by being that bridge builder and pulling everyone together and being like, these are our goals, this is the direction that we're going, let's hammer through it and figure it out. It's pretty amazing the progress that you can have by like forcing that conversation.
Yeah, you need an information bank. You need a repository of information from all these people. This wave of intelligence sharing across all the players in it, in order for it to happen. I mean, everybody's working in their little siloed verticals,
Mm-hmm.
possibly, and others are just ignorantly going along because they just don't know what else is out there. Like you said, they don't know which way they should be going, so therefore
Yeah.
they don't because
No, exactly. And it was a fun process. Like, prior to this job, I was in procurement, and that was like the go-to thing was when there was a problem, you pull your suppliers in, you tell them to figure it out. And so
yeah,
we
exactly,
did
right.
that, and just on a bigger scale of a couple different points in that supply chain process. And we're like, we got to figure this out. This is the direction we're going. This is the direction your customers want to go. How do we get there? And put people to work.
It's amazing. So there's the other part to that, to the design part, like you're talking about. In my mind, and others we've always discussed, is the consumer facing side, right? I've heard executives of major brands, consumer product brands specifically, say that, yeah, if we could package differently, but that's our advertising, and therefore we're not, right? So in my mind, that leads to the consumers have been purposely educated to look for the shiny object and buy it, right? We figured out that certain colors, create certain emotions and certain buying habits and certain styles, et cetera, and stuff. I've heard the tests when you walk down an aisle, you may not know it, but if you're looking for a certain product, like category of product, within 3 seconds, your brain has already decided what you're going to buy. And you may sit there for 3 minutes and decide over yourself, but it's already been made.
Yeah, it is
Right.
true. It is true.
It is that quick in such a science. So what's the responsibility of, this quasi brainwashing, if you will, if not just straight out brainwashing, to make the sustainable and correct choice the one that your brain picks up quickly?
Yeah.
Consumer education is what I'm talking about here, right? In a very scientific marketing way, is where's the responsibility there, or how do we build that? Because that seems to me to be very important from the design side, in my opinion, and maybe I'm wrong and you can change my mind. That's fine. That's why we're having this discussion. My next thought goes to the pull side, the demand, because they're looking at design. It's got to have the functionality and all that kind of stuff, which is great, to a certain point, as long as it's not something crazy. Like, we don't have to go down the detergent aisle and be able to smell the beautiful fragrances, because quite frankly, you can't tell whether you're smelling, all temperature or Tide or whatever, you don't know, because it's all mixed. So
Yeah.
why do they have to be smelled? Why does the smell have to permeate?
Yeah.
Nobody cares. Until they get it in their house, they don't care, right? I mean, because you can't tell what's different. It just smells like perfume down that aisle, right? But it's intentional. So
It is.
why? Well, so that's my next thing is marketing there. Is that something that you guys work on as well with the marketing departments with those companies to try and figure out how to re-educate the consumer?
Yeah. So We haven't launched it yet, but it is in scope in the near future. And the reason for that, ultimately the consumer behavior piece can't get ignored. And I oftentimes say it's consumer engagement, not just education, because you can tell
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah,
if you can't get them to do
better.
it, there's no point.
100%.
But before we engage the consumer, we have to make sure that we have our ducks in a row. So, like, is it designed correctly? Is it like access to recycle in place? Do we have good messaging? All of that has to be in place. Otherwise, you're going to confuse the consumer. And you're seeing it happen now because even with the different exposés that have come out and whatnot, consumers are like, I don't even know if I should recycle. I don't know if I'm doing more harm than good. And you're just confusing the heck out of people.
Yeah, 100%.
So, yeah. Yep. So I've pushed on companies a lot to say, like, get your design in place so that we know this is recyclable. Make sure you're putting demand for post-consumer recycled content in place so that the MRF takes it, sells it to a recycler, the recycler can sell it to someone, it can be used to something else. We have to make sure those fundamentals are in place, and then we go to the consumer. And it is going to take harmonized messaging. Like, it's not enough for one company to say, hey, our one little niche product over here is designed to be recycled and it uses recycled content. That doesn't move the needle. Like, it's got to be standard on all the mainstream SKUs. And it's got to be a message from the industry, and they all need to be saying the same things. That's a point of frustration for me sometimes because you do have these like outlandish claims. Take this, put it in your trash can, it'll magically disappear without harming the environment, like things like that. and that kind of those greenwash.
I've not found that one. Where is that one? I love it.
I might be exaggerating slightly, but
I'm gonna edit that out because we're gonna have to patent that idea.
Yeah, but it's important, that we have consistent messaging to consumers on like, this is recyclable. Here's how you recycle it. This is compostable. Here's what that means and what you do with it. This is reusable. So, like, this is what you should do with it. Like, don't keep it at home and put it on your shelf because it looks nice. Like, actually take it back to the place so it can get refilled. All of these things need to be in place, and we need to, like, as an industry, as much as we can, lock arms and move forward together because consumers have been taught convenience, convenience, convenience. Our way of life demands that because we move 100 miles an hour, and you now have, dual working parents, single family home or single parent homes. Like, your kids are in 8 million sports activities. We're all busy. And so we've got to make it easy for the consumer because nobody has hours a day to sit and sort through all of their trash and figure out where it needs to go. So I've gone on.
But it's the importance, the immediacy of the issue isn't perceived by right. The immediacy of your kid being going to practice or school or work and all that stuff is real, and it's right there in your face. The immediacy of the negative impacts of you just saying, hell, throw this away because I don't have the time isn't there. Right. I mean, the importance level is perceived in your brain, but it's somewhat down because of the immediacy. If I throw this out right now, nothing negative is going to happen to me for maybe 25 years.
Right. And, it's not fair. Like, it's a burden to consumers if this is like the number one thing they have to think about. Like, it shouldn't be that way.
Exactly.
Have it structured so that it is relatively easy to do the right thing. And be able to go on living your life without having to worry about it.
Yeah, and that's exactly right, and many agree with you. That's and I as well I agree with you. Correcting from education to engagement, and that engagement can only happen once you've got everything set up. Because as the generations progress, I contend the BS meter gets more and more sensitive.
Yeah.
And it's the proliferation of information, immediate information from around the globe, and that has allowed for just all this data hitting and information hitting you from all these sources that there used to be 2 or 3 sources, and therefore they were credible. Now there's billions of sources of information, and people now individually can choose which one is credible or not, which makes it very, very hard to then engage. And then, because just down my street, there's 100 houses or 50 houses in this neighborhood, right? Each house could have a different credible source of information.
They probably do. I mean, really.
And they probably do, right? And so composting is very real at that house, but this house doesn't even consider it because their information says it's BS. This one's that's really hard to do. So when you're ready to go and you say, okay, you better be ready because a fail is going to file like wildfire and we focus on those things too, right? We focus on not the good that recycling does, not the 18% or 9% that's being recycled of this or that. It's the report that says, wish cycling. These guys aren't really recycling. That's where everybody focuses. Go, see, it's baloney. I am allowed to be just, immediate gratification and convenience.
Yes. And that's why, I mean, it discourages me as much as anybody else when some of these negative reports come out, but it's motivation that we have to fix it. Like the response to not be like, well, it's not my fault or some plastic gets recycled. Like the response needs to be like, what structural issues are there that are causing us to not recycle the majority of plastic, and then to fix that. I do think that when consumers, like they will never fully understand this because it's pretty technical and people are already overloaded with things they need to worry about in a day. But when they see that this is happening, like that will be part of what can help them know that their efforts matter, because nobody wants to go to the work of sorting through your stuff if it doesn't matter. It's just going to the landfill anyway. So, for example, one day my neighbor came up to me. He knows I work what my job is, and he was so mad because he went to the grocery store with his bags, and this teenager was like, "Don't worry about what bin you put in; it's all going to the trash anyway." And he was so angry, and rightfully so, that he's doing the work of like keeping his bags, taking them back to the store, and then someone said they're just getting thrown away. And so,
was the kid accurate?
I have no idea. I don't go to that store.
I mean, I hear those, and I know that certain ones are accurate. I mean, you can lift the thing, and it's one bin underneath here, and you're like, what? But yeah.
Yeah, but I mean that discourages people because he was doing the work to do the right thing, and then it's apparently not paying off. And so we need to fix the structural issues, make sure design is correct, make sure collection is in place, make sure end markets are there to actually recycle this stuff, and then you go to the consumers and you say, this is what you need to do. There needs to be harmonized messaging, and to some extent, that's only going to happen with policy. So the FTC is working on a green guides update. I don't know when that will come out, but there needs to be like firmer rules around claims and the legitimacy of claims.
Yeah. And so on that vein, real quick, let me ask you this question, because you briefly passed by California, and we're talking about the second time that this is now the second time that they've banned plastic bags, right? But aside from that, and there's hope there. I'm actually talking to a company, and I can tell you about them afterwards. That is working with retailers and stuff that has us for solutions which they didn't have before when they banned it the first time.
Yeah,
but when like California came out and said you can't put recyclable on certain packaging, right? And it wasn't because it wasn't recyclable, it's because they don't recycle it.
Well, and that's the thing. Like,
in my opinion, that's baloney. It should say that it is recyclable. It's your fault that you don't recycle it, California. It's the industry's fault that we're not recycling it. It is recyclable. 100% of all plastics are recyclable in some way. We just don't have the ability or the infrastructure to do it. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean,
correct me. I mean, if I'm wrong, correct me, because I mean, that's what this is, a discussion. But that's how I see that. I'm like, wait a minute, that's baloney.
I somewhat agree with you, but not fully. And the reason for that is, like, there's technically recyclable, and then there's, can we do this at scale? And I see this in a manufacturing environment, like in a lab, on a pilot line, you can do all sorts of things. But when it comes to putting it on a production line, and you've got to scale up, and you have to do it at the run rates you need to make it profitable, like that's where a lot of things can go wrong. And so if we had unlimited resources to pay people well to pick through all the stuff in the recycling stream, make sure it goes to the right place, do whatever you got to do to recycle it. Like, yes, conceivably that's possible, but like, can you do that cost effectively? And I don't think you can, because no one wants to pay $10 a pound for plastic. I'm probably exaggerating there, but that's where the balance is of like, yes, it could be technically recyclable, but can you collect it and process it at scale? And not all plastic can be collected and recycled at scale for different efficiency reasons.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. It makes complete sense. So how do you, when you move down your list, right? Because we talked about proper design, which really draws in affects number one, reducing virgin, right? It also impacts 30% PCR content, that goal, right? It also increases packaging recycling, right? Or the ability to, or the recyclable. Well, this is what we're discussing, right?
Yeah.
It solves the issue we just talked about as well, right? Because now you can't do that. But when I see, I talk to people about different, all kinds of different new technologies that are coming out, whether it's pyrolysis or, what have you. Chemical, non-chemical, kind of chemical, like pure cycling is like chemical washing, but it's not really chemical recycling.
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff, right? There's all these different things. They're all really great, but if you can't collect the plastic and get it to them, it's worthless. Mm-hmm. So there is the rub, right? That's the rub is how do you get it there? How do you then impact what you're talking about at the MRFs? Because even when you say, okay, we're going to, we've got the demand, we've got the design, all this stuff is in place. Is single stream, the way they're doing it, actually going to be something that's going to be able to supply that? I mean, in near enough term that it's going to make it move the needle in any meaningful fashion?
I think there's unique challenges in the United States, and sometimes we look to Europe and you see much higher recycling rates. And some of it is like the consumer piece. Like, I think there's different, culturally, there's different values there and such.
Sure.
That tie in with that. But a lot of times you have like a much more densely populated area. And so you're not having to transport stuff.
Yeah.
And you can't overlook the impact of I'm from Nebraska. Like, Western Nebraska is very different than New York City, and you may not have like the for lots of reasons. But
now that's an understatement.
But you can't necessarily expect to have the exact same solutions in each place because there's different challenges. In New York City, they have space constraints. In Western Nebraska, they don't have space constraints. But at the same time, like, you might drive 25 miles before you see the next house. So that presents different transportation challenges. And so as much as we want to standardize across the country to make it easier for consumers, like, you do have to take those things into account. And so
100%. Yes, absolutely.
So some places,
go ahead.
So some places like single stream recycling, like, that's the most convenient for the consumer. And I think wherever we can make that work, we should. Yeah. I think you also need like hub and spoke models. I think you need different take back programs, drop off programs, et cetera. And there's benefits to those things, particularly for materials that maybe aren't as high volume or in less densely populated areas, if people are going back to the store or to a centralized location. A couple of our activators, D6 and Walmart, are doing a really interesting program down in Texas where they've taken these containers and they made I think 6 different compartments, and they put them in the parking lot of a Walmart or Sam's Club. And consumers can take their products back. They have to sort it themselves, but they're getting great engagement from the communities. They're sorting it themselves correctly. And then D6 is able to take those containers and go and recycle it. And that's really fascinating to me because they've worked hard on the community, like, education and engagement piece to get people to do it and to do it correctly. Also, they're not taking the stuff back into the store. And like with the bags, that can be a problem because if there's food contamination, now you've got to worry about like pests. Like, I don't want mice in my grocery store. That's like a real thing. But like, if it stays in the parking lot,
it's a very real thing. Yeah.
Yeah. If it stays in the parking lot, you don't have to worry about something comes in with food contamination and now you're tracking pests. And so it's interesting to see how that develops. Like, the state of Oregon is working on some depots for different drop-off drop off collection of different things. And I think it's going to take a suite of solutions. Like, I don't think there's a silver bullet. If there was, we would have found it. It's going to take some piecemealing of effective solutions in the right spots.
Yeah, it definitely is. So once you've got there, I mean, I believe you said you guys like that. Another step that is coming is the engagement piece, right? So you're focusing on these five and realizing that, okay, once we start gaining some success here at a specific level, not that you're not having success yet, but at a specific level, then we've really got to start concentrating on this kind of sixth or this other, which is this engagement.
Well, and I think we've looked at it as like that consumer engagement piece falls into target 3, like collecting and recycling plastic.
It does. It impacts that for sure. Right.
Yeah. So if the consumers aren't turning it back in, it's not going to be recycled. But the other thing that this is a personal frustration to me is that I don't think companies really understand what drives the consumer behavior to recycle. And that is strange to me because companies are marketers. And so if you're developing a new product, like, who your target customer is, their gender, their age, how many kids they have, where they shop, like all of this is determined before you launch a product. But no one has really led in the area of understanding what is truly that engagement piece of what's truly driving that consumer to do the extra steps to then like properly recycle or reuse or package or whatever they're supposed to do. And so I'm seeing some things happen now with trying to get to that level of data and research. Like it can happen. There's just not been a focus on it, but we need to approach that consumer engagement piece from the same angle that companies approach it when they're trying to launch a new product, because you're driving behavior to get them to buy your product in the first place. And so as an industry, we need to think about how do we drive that behavior to get them to recycle. And it can be done. You need like consumer insights folks to focus on that.
Yeah, you definitely do. I mean, there are studies. I mean, and maybe they seem to be getting more and more sophisticated, right? Because you see more and more studies about how people are doing. There's people doing a lot of extensive work. One of them, the Recycling Partnership, Keith Harrison. They've got that new whole section to what they're doing there that is really studying, and they've actually done studies inside the house, studied with families and how they actually do things, which are gaining some really good insight. So it's a new study, but it seems to be gaining ground pretty quickly. I mean, they've, like you said, they've done it in many other areas before, so they have the groundwork of how to do these studies. So they should be able to gather that intelligence.
It is
fairly
and
quickly.
One thing I would say on that too is it's twofold. So there's like how do communities engage their citizens, and then there's how do companies engage their consumers, and both need to happen. So I think we're making strides forward, but we've got to think about it from both angles. And like, there's no reason companies can't be doing social media campaigns and things like that. Like they can engage their consumers that way, while cities and other local governments are doing the same thing from a different angle.
Now, we before we recorded, we both were speaking about a mutual friend of ours out in Phoenix, Arizona, and one of the interesting things there is that they own all their waste, all their waste processing. Right. Yeah. It's not privatized. So they can make meaningful impacts. Now, like where I live, you've got different private organizations that have contracts for waste removal, and they're rather old. And some of them are not waste companies. They're actually owned by companies that are searching for a specific material. Right. Yeah. And so these other materials are kind of done just to say they can do it, and right. And that's a difficult thing to do, because now you've got free market capitalism that is in the way. And I've talked to many different large cities who would love to engage with some of the solutions that we try to present, but they can't because of these contracts. And when you go to these privatized companies, they don't. It's not their wheelhouse. Therefore, no. How's that? Do you have any thoughts on that, or is that just like I get it. It's a hurdle, man. Is there any way to attack that you guys see, or is that just something, hey, we got to work around somehow?
I don't have a silver bullet solution on that one, but I would say a couple of things. So there's a lot of pressure around the idea of responsible end markets. And you see that with like extended producer responsibility legislation in Oregon and California. And so if it's going to like there's an agreement upon which materials are going to be covered, so they're collected, and then they're tied to an end market, they're definitely getting recycled. I think the other piece that is happening, and I'm seeing some work done on this, and we hope to do more on in the future as well, but like an understanding of where is this stuff going once it leaves your facility. So if you think about traceability, come from food. So it used to be that 20 years ago, people didn't necessarily know where their stuff originated. That caused a lot of problems because it, changes hands. The next thing, something shows up contaminated in your facility and you've got a recall. So over the course of years, a lot of work went into place in tracing it all the way up the supply chain to figure out exactly where it started, who touched it in between, where it went. Yeah. And there's work being done early stages, but in like reverse traceability. So understanding where does it go next. And instead of just like we sell it to somebody and then assume they take care of it, like our contracts are written to make sure it does get recycled. These materials are getting sold. Who are they selling it to? Like they're not selling it overseas, those kinds of things. I do think in the coming years, you will potentially see some certification programs and things like that to make sure that it's actually getting sold to places it's supposed to go. So it does get recycled. And I think it's a bit of a headache with all the paperwork, but I think it's going to be critical to making sure that when things get put in a bin, they do actually go to the recycler.
Well, I agree with you. And I think it's a critical and essential part of engagement with the consumer is being able to give them transparent, auditable data that says this happened and prove it.
Yeah.
And it's going to have to be pretty tight because like we said before, one crack and you've lost half the people's confidence.
It's very real. I went to the mountains of North Carolina and was at a little diner, and my kids give me a hard time because like they brought out a takeout container and I'm like cramming everything into it to use as few of them as possible. And they're making the server was looking at me kind of funny. And then my husband goes, "Oh, she's in recycling." And the girl looks at me kind of funny and she goes, "Is the stuff that I'm putting in my bin actually getting recycled?" So like I'm at a little diner in a little tiny town in the mountains of North Carolina and somebody's asking.
They question it. Yeah, because they've heard it. Because their trusted news source says no, it's not, or you should question it. Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I get looked at crazy too. Well, I go to the store and I show up at the counter, and all my produce is just in my buggy. Nothing's in any of the little plastic bags or anything like that. It's just rolling down the conveyor. And they're looking at me like I'm nuts, and I'm like, I'm going to wash it before I leave. It's fine. What's the problem? Do my onions really have to be separated from my tomatoes just to make it home in these nice little bags that I'm going to throw out as soon as I get home?
Yeah, I know. They look at me funny sometimes too, because if I forget to take my reusable bags with me, I'll just like carry everything out in my arms. I'll be like, I don't need a bag. I don't need a bag.
Yeah, no, I do that too. I was like, do you need a bag? No, I got these 10 things. No problem. Right. That's why I brought my kids with me.
Exactly.
I love it. That's fantastic. I do. Look, almost 50 minutes blew by and we've hit like almost maybe half of your points here. It's tremendous stuff. I really appreciate you coming on. I'd love to have you on again and discuss more and talk about what you guys are doing there. This is really, it's insightful information. And we should dig into more of what you're talking about from your perspective, because I do have, people from industry and recycling that are I would call them like direct participants, kind of, and you are a direct participant in it as well. But you're impacting people who are recycling and people who are designing in production, right? You don't design or you don't actually recycle. You're advising and connecting all these things, which is essential. It is essential. It's what we've needed for a long time, and quite frankly, need in other industries to get the collaboration to go in fish, and especially in my original field of logistics. It's they need to collaborate, but they don't, and they need an organization like you're doing in recycling, et cetera. So I applaud what you're doing. Really, really great information. I appreciate it very much coming on, Crystal. Where do people go to learn more about what U.S. Plastics Pact is doing, and who should? I would imagine just about anybody should, just to see what the industries are doing. But who's your target that you wish is going to call you today and go, "Hey, Crystal, we need to talk"?
Yeah.
And how do they do that?
Well, so a few different ways. Thank you for that question. So anybody can go to our website, which is www.usplasticspact.org. And so that's a great place to start. And on there, you can also see a contact for our email address to get more information. I'd also recommend following us on LinkedIn. We post a lot of updates on there. And so that's a great way to just see what's going on. And I think, we're bringing together the full value chain. So I'd love to talk to anybody who is using plastics, designing plastics, handling plastics, anyway, tangentially, I can't say that right, connected to the plastics industry. But I would say too, even on our website, we're just beginning to put out some more information for consumers, because we are starting to get random folks that are concerned about this and stumble upon our website and want to understand what they should be doing. So while we're focused on working more with companies and organizations, we are starting to engage the consumer more. And it is good to see them, it's good to see folks concerned about this and reaching out and trying to understand what's going on so they can make the right decisions too.
Yeah, there is a wealth of information on here. Your different thing, your PCR toolkit, roadmaps to circularity, all that type of stuff is fantastic. It's a great website. It's got a wealth of knowledge for people who are, hey, does my stuff really get recycled, and what's going on here?
Thank you. And I should probably mention this earlier, but
yeah, please.
We don't just have the targets. We're focused on helping our companies and organizations within the Pact achieve those goals. So that's one thing that meant a lot to me in taking this job and in doing this job. It's just not like we're just thinking about how we want the world to be. It's like we set a goal and that vision, and then rally people around that, and then provide the practical tools to help them make progress. So like the Film and Flex series that I talked about previously is just one example of really bringing folks together to problem solve and figure out how to make progress on those targets in very practical ways. And so it's exciting to see that happen. And I'm looking just forward to the next few years, because I think we're building momentum. And as we make progress in one area, it unlocks progress in others.
It really does. Yeah, no, I love it. I mean, you're not just, hey, recycle more. Yeah, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Those commercials have been around since gas was probably about 20 cents a gallon, and you couldn't even buy unleaded gas.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, it's my age, and I really don't care if you want to judge me by the number of trips around the sun. That's fine. But in the 70s, when we were buying gas for our motorcycles for 25 cents a gallon, literally, you also had commercials saying, with the crying on the side of the road as somebody dumps trash at his feet and stuff. I mean, that doesn't work. You can't shame us people into recycling. It's more than just, hey, you need to recycle. Yeah. Did you start recycling yet? You come back to, did you start recycling yet? No, there's got to be actually work being done. And I applaud you for doing that stuff. It's fantastic stuff. Thank you so much for being on the program. I hope you have a great day and much success. And we need to stay in touch and catch up.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
You got it. Thank you, everybody, for downloading and listening to the Sustainiacs. I'm Mike Vincent. Peace and love. Until next time. Irreverent logistics.